Keanu had been noticing his secretary David for months now. Every night after their long workdays, David would stop at the same place before heading home. At first, Keanu thought it was nothing unusual. But over time little things started to stand out. David seemed more tense, his eyes always darting to the rearview mirror. There were signs of exhaustion on his face, and he would often drive with the car running hotter than usual. Keanu was good at noticing the small details and something just didn't feel right. One night as they drove home, Keanu couldn't ignore the feeling that something was off. The silence in the car was heavier than usual. Keanu watched David's behavior closely. His grip on the steering wheel was tight, and his shoulders were tense. He kept looking into the rearview mirror as if expecting someone or something. It wasn't like David to act this way. Curiosity began to eat at Keanu. What was going on? Why did David always stop in the same spot at night? Something was wrong, and Keanu couldn't shake the feeling that he needed to find out. So, instead of heading home that night, Keanu made a decision. He told David to drop him off, but instead of leaving, Keanu followed David from a distance. He watched as David parked the car in the usual spot. The cold night air and the sound of rain on the streets made the situation feel even more mysterious. Keanu felt a tightness in his chest, knowing that whatever he was about to discover would change everything. It was a rainy night in Los Angeles, and the streets glistened with reflections from the streetlights. Keanu sat quietly in the passenger seat, watching the rain pour down, tapping gently on the car's windows. The sound was soothing, but something in the car felt off. David, his secretary, was acting strange, more tense than usual. Keanu couldn't help but notice it. His hands gripped the steering wheel a little too tightly, and his eyes darted to the rearview mirror more often than normal. Keanu knew something wasn't right, but he couldn't figure out what. As they drove, Keanu's gaze landed on a small stuffed teddy bear sitting on the seat beside him. It looked worn out and a bit dirty, not something you'd expect to find in a car like this. Keanu hadn't seen it before, and it made him wonder. His eyes then drifted to the dashboard, noticing small marks left behind by something that had been stuck there for a long time, perhaps a tablet mount or some old toy. Everything seemed out of place, and Keanu's suspicion only grew stronger. When they reached the usual spot where David always stopped, Keanu's curiosity got the best of him. Instead of getting out of the car, Keanu decided to follow David. He wanted to know what was really going on. He kept his distance but watched as David parked and sat in the car, staring ahead, looking lost in thought. It wasn't long before another car pulled up. A woman stepped out, holding something in her arms. David got out of his car, and Keanu saw him gently take a small child into his arms. It hit him all at once. David wasn't just struggling with work, he was also taking care of his daughter, living in the car and doing whatever he could to survive. As Keanu watched David carefully hold the small child in his arms, a wave of emotions washed over him. The image of David cradling his daughter made Keanu think about his own past, before the fame, the money, and the luxurious life he now led. He thought about the tough times he had faced in his younger years, when he didn't have a stable place to sleep or a home to call his own. Keanu remembered the cold nights in Toronto, crashing on friends' couches or sometimes even sleeping in his own car, just like David. He had once felt lost and uncertain about what the future would bring. He remembered the fear of not knowing where his next meal would come from, and how it felt to be struggling every day. But one thing stood out in his mind: the kindness of a stranger who had helped him when he was at his lowest. This stranger, an older man who owned a small auto repair shop, had given Keanu a chance. He didn't give him money or just offer charity. Instead, he gave him work, small tasks like changing tires or organizing tools. That small act had meant the world to Keanu. It had given him a chance to get back on his feet and begin to rebuild his life. It was the first time Keanu truly understood the difference between simply giving money and offering someone a real opportunity. As Keanu sat there watching David and his daughter, he realized that he couldn't let this go on any longer. David needed help, and Keanu knew exactly what he needed to do. He couldn't stand by and do nothing when he saw someone in need, especially when he saw so much of himself in David. Keanu wasn't the type to ignore his feelings or walk away from a situation that felt wrong. That night, Keanu tossed and turned in bed, unable to sleep. The image of David and his daughter haunted him. He couldn't stop thinking about how David had been trying to survive, just like he had once done. Keanu knew he had to act. He couldn't let David continue to struggle without offering him a chance for something better. The next morning, Keanu made a decision. He would offer David a way out of his situation, not just a handout but a real opportunity. Keanu didn't want David or his daughter to feel like a burden. He wanted to offer them a fresh start, a chance for stability, and a home where they wouldn't have to worry about survival anymore. Keanu knew this was the right thing to do and he wouldn't back down. The next evening, Keanu decided to take a gentle approach. He knew that David was proud and offering him help outright might make him feel uncomfortable. So, Keanu invited David to dinner at a small, cozy Italian restaurant downtown. It was the kind of place that wasn't fancy or full of celebrities, just a quiet spot with good food and a warm atmosphere. When they arrived, Keanu greeted David with a friendly smile, and they sat at a table near the window. The restaurant was simple, but the warm lighting and the smell of fresh pasta gave it a homey feel. Keanu didn't want to make the dinner awkward, so he let the conversation flow naturally. They both ordered their food, and Keanu noticed how David seemed hesitant, as if he was carefully thinking about what to order. Keanu knew that look. It was the same one he had seen in himself when money was tight, and every decision had to be made carefully. After a few moments of silence, Keanu decided it was time to speak. He started by sharing a little about his own past. "You know, David," Keanu began, looking out the window, "I've been through some tough times myself. Before all this, I didn't have a stable place to stay. I remember what it's like to feel lost, not knowing where I was going to sleep at night." David looked up, surprised. He hadn't known much about Keanu's past struggles. Keanu continued, "When I was younger, a man gave me a chance. He didn't give me money, he gave me work. That work gave me dignity. It gave me something to build on, something I could start over with." David listened closely, and Keanu could see that the words were resonating with him. "I want you to know," Keanu said gently, "that I see you. I see what you're going through and I want to help. But I don't want to give you charity. I want to give you a real chance to start over." Keanu paused for a moment, allowing the words to sink in. Then he looked David in the eyes and said, "I have an empty apartment. It's not fancy, but it's safe and it's yours if you want it. You and your daughter can stay there. No rent, no bills. Just a fresh start." David sat quietly for a moment, overwhelmed by the offer. Keanu didn't pressure him. He knew it would take time for David to process everything, but he hoped that his words would give him the courage to take the next step. David sat in silence, his fingers playing with the edge of his napkin. Keanu could see the conflict in his eyes. David was a proud man, and the idea of accepting help from someone else wasn't easy. He had been struggling for so long, trying to hold everything together on his own, that the thought of someone offering him a hand felt almost like a defeat. "I can't accept this," David said quietly, looking down at his plate. "I'm not the kind of person who takes charity." Keanu nodded, understanding David's hesitation. "I get it, David," he said softly. "I'm not offering you charity. I'm offering you a chance. A real chance to rebuild. You don't have to do this alone anymore." David looked up at Keanu, his eyes filled with doubt. "But I don't want to feel like I'm taking something from you. I don't want to be a burden." Keanu leaned forward, his tone kind but firm. "You're not a burden, David. This isn't about pity. It's about giving you the space to get back on your feet. You've worked hard. You deserve a chance just like I did when I was struggling. I'm not giving you a handout, I'm offering you an opportunity to start over." David swallowed hard, his chest tightening. He wanted to argue, but Keanu's words were like a weight being lifted off his shoulders. He could see that Keanu truly meant what he was saying, and the sincerity in his eyes made it harder to resist. David had been carrying so much for so long. He had tried to protect his daughter and keep going, but the burden was getting too heavy. And now here was a real chance to escape the cycle of worry and uncertainty. After a long pause, David finally spoke. "You really mean it, don't you?" Keanu smiled gently. "Of course I do. I want to help. And it's not just about the apartment. I know you have skills, David. I've already talked to a friend who owns a small auto repair shop. He's willing to give you a job. You'll have a steady income, a place to stay, and the chance to provide for your daughter." David looked at Keanu, his heart pounding. He felt a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. This was more than he could have hoped for. It was a fresh start, something he thought was impossible. "I don't know how to thank you," David whispered, his voice shaky. Keanu placed a hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to thank me. Just take the opportunity and make the most of it. You and your daughter deserve this." With that, David nodded, his eyes filling with tears. For the first time in a long while, he felt a glimmer of hope. This was his chance to start over, and he wasn't going to let it slip away. "For Omini, you said." A new beginning, David's transformation. Over time, David starts working at the auto repair shop, and his daughter begins going to school regularly. Hope for the future. Keanu's quiet support has helped David rebuild his life. The story concludes with David, Emily, and Keanu reflecting on how kindness and second chances can change lives. 400 words dy do simple English ma. ChatGPT said. Over the next few weeks, David's life began to change in ways he never thought possible. He started working at the small auto repair shop, fixing cars and learning new skills. The work wasn't easy, but it was steady, and it gave David a sense of pride. For the first time in a long while, he didn't have to worry about where his next meal would come from or where he and Emily would sleep at night. Emily too began to thrive. She started going to school regularly, making friends and enjoying the stability she had never known before. She loved her new room, decorated with stars on the ceiling just like she dreamed. David watched her grow more confident and happier every day, and it filled him with gratitude. Keanu too saw the changes in David. He would visit David's new home every now and then, always smiling when he saw how comfortable and at peace they were. It wasn't about the money or the things Keanu had given them. It was about the second chance he had provided. Keanu didn't expect anything in return. He knew that giving someone a fresh start was about more than just offering a place to live, it was about offering them hope. One evening, Keanu stopped by the small auto shop where David worked. He had been busy with his own projects, but he wanted to check in on his friend. When he arrived, David was wiping his hands with a rag, a smile on his face. Emily was sitting on the steps outside, holding her teddy bear and talking to a classmate on the phone. David looked up at Keanu, his face full of gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you," he said, his voice full of emotion. "You changed our lives." Keanu smiled warmly. "You don't need to thank me, David. You did all the hard work. I just gave you a chance." As the two men stood there, looking out at the shop in the quiet evening, they both knew that this was just the beginning. David had a future now, one filled with possibilities, and Emily had the stability and safety she deserved. Their lives were forever changed, not by the material things Keanu had given them, but by his belief in their potential. This story was a reminder that kindness and second chances could transform lives. It wasn't about grand gestures, it was about offering someone a way out, helping them rebuild when they had lost everything. And sometimes, that small act of kindness could lead to a lifetime of hope and new beginnings. As Keanu stood outside, looking up at the stars that stretched across the night sky, he couldn't help but feel a sense of peace. The world was full of noise, struggles, and pain, but in that moment, Keanu realized that one small act of kindness had the power to change everything. It wasn't about grand gestures or big flashy moments. It was about seeing someone in need and offering them a chance when no one else would. It was about reaching out when it felt easier to look the other way. Keanu had always been aware of the struggles around him. He had seen the pain of those who were invisible, the people who worked tirelessly yet still couldn't catch a break. He knew what it felt like to be alone, to be unsure of the future. That's why David's situation had hit him so deeply. Keanu saw a part of himself in David, someone who had been lost but had the potential to rise again, given the right opportunity. When Keanu offered David a place to stay and a job at the auto repair shop, he wasn't just giving him shelter or work. He was offering him hope. And hope was something far more powerful than anything money could buy. It was the belief that no matter how bad things got, there was always a way forward, always a chance to start over. Keanu didn't give David charity, he gave him a chance to rebuild his life. And that made all the difference. As Keanu watched David's transformation over the past few weeks, he realized that this small act of kindness wasn't just about changing one person's life. It was about creating a ripple effect. When David found stability, he could now give that same hope to his daughter, Emily. And when Emily grew up, she would remember how someone believed in her family when they had nothing. She would learn to help others, to pay forward the kindness that had been shown to her. In this way, the ripple effect of kindness would continue, spreading out into the world, touching lives far beyond the ones Keanu had helped directly. Keanu smiled softly as he thought about how many times he had been helped along the way by strangers, by people who didn't expect anything in return. It was those moments of kindness that had helped him get to where he was today. Now it was his turn to pay it forward. The world was full of people in need, people who were struggling just like he had once struggled. Keanu knew that the world needed more moments of empathy, more acts of kindness, no matter how small they seemed. Looking up at the stars, Keanu felt a sense of calm wash over him. He knew that his simple act of offering David a fresh start was just the beginning. There was so much more to be done, so many more people who needed a chance. And as long as he was able, Keanu would continue to offer that chance to others, knowing that each act of kindness could create a ripple effect, changing lives in ways they couldn't even imagine. This story serves as a reminder that the world can be a better place if we take the time to help each other. Whether it's offering someone a place to stay, giving them a job, or simply showing compassion, our small actions can have a huge impact. The world needs more moments of empathy, and each of us has the power to create those moments. Keanu's journey with David is proof that kindness truly has the power to change lives.